good. Jesus is doing good, but you're not meeting my expectations. Work situation like this, or a volunteer situation where you're doing the right thing, but you're not meeting someone else's expectation, or angry. So yeah, that could very good. Yeah, that Jesus never really got. Are we getting through with volume? Yeah? Okay, good. All right. Yeah, good.
May I ask also,
Yes.
you know, I'm a fisherman,
Yeah.
two brothers, and there's someone first to come on to follow Jesus. And I'm trying to, I can't remember where Judas started.
Oh, that's a good thing, good to point out. And I'm going to go over that a little bit later. Judas was the only Judean. He was only one from Judah. The rest were from Galilee. And so, yeah, where did Judas come along? There's no scripture regarding that. There's where Jesus finds Judas. But we do know that he called him. I mean, I've called you. Judas mentions that. You have 1988. And you all remember 1988. Even you remember 1988. And on television, there was a weeping Jimmy Swaggart. He was covered in tears. The photo of him has become iconic, as a matter of fact. And Jimmy Swaggart says, "I have sinned." And he got caught with a prostitute. Matter of fact, what he did, the story behind that is he outed somebody else and their sin, another minister. And that minister felt like he wasn't, and I never got quite the detail on that. I think it was unwarranted. I think that minister was sinning in the way that was alleged by Jimmy Swaggart, but Jimmy Swaggart just had it out for him. And so that minister had him followed in the hotel room and caught him and everything. Well, that minister, whatever he is, was not on the up and up. Because that minister then said, "I caught you. You're with a prostitute in that hotel room, and I don't think you're counseling her. And I will give you time. And I won't tell anybody, but this is what you need to do. You need to restore my reputation in the community. And he waited a year, this guy did. And finally, and Jimmy Swaggart didn't. And so he outed Jimmy Swaggart. And Jimmy Swaggart was very apologetic. And, people can make mistakes. Pastors can make mistakes. We understand that. And he's crying on television. We understand he definitely, a terrible error. And I think the world could have found forgiveness for him. And I don't think they did. In 1988, we weren't as forgiving because it wasn't hitting the news as much. This was so shocking at that time because it had never been. And the world wasn't as forgiving. But it turned out for good reason, because in 1991 he was caught again with another prostitute. And he said at that time he had another ministry, and he said to the board of that ministry, he said that the Lord told him that it just wasn't any of their damn business. So anyhow, but these things, goes from to 2021, and you have Ravi Zacharias, this apologist, this Christian apologist, who I think I might have mentioned. He, wrote some good books. He was a great speaker. And it just appears like the last 8 years of his life, he became a quintessential dirty old man and really abused some people's testimony, as it were. People that could have been Christians, he basically destroyed their faith. And we're talking about women. He owned spas. We might call them massage parlors. And, that kind of a little bit of a red flag there. But And he was defended by Christendom for a little while until, it's just rolling out. Now, he passed away this year. But it's kind of a category. I mean, and yet this is a betrayal of Christ in a way. It besmirches Christ's name and remembered for the negatives, not the positives. But we have a hard time wrapping our head around this and why certain people do the things they do. In particular, Judas.
Maybe, it was God's plan that it happened that way.
Mm-hmm.
And we never know how much remorse Judas really felt afterwards. But the things that happened all fell in place. But, what happened to Jesus was supposed to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And
And that brings up a point. Did Judas have a choice? I'm just listening. I'm not commenting right now. He made out. What do you think?
Well, I thought, weren't there many disciples at one point? Maybe 100, maybe more than that.
Mm-hmm.
But when Jesus is teaching, consume my body,
Right.
drink my blood,
Yes.
they fell away.
Yes.
He says to the 12, are you going to leave too?
Mm-hmm.
And they say, but you, or
Where
Peter
else?
speaking for the 12,
For them,
says,
yeah.
but you have the words of life.
Where else can we go?
Where else are we going to go?
Yeah.
So they left without necessarily doing damage. Maybe they lost personally by leaving him, but
Yes.
they didn't retaliate.
Right.
But Judas,
Mm.
he's not even called out for his thievery yet, and he's already going to the high priest and making his bargain.
Yes. Yeah.
So I think he was kind of an outsider from the beginning.
Could have been. Could have been. Uh-huh. Did Judas have a choice? I know Bonnie and I know Cheryl and Archie, and did Judas have a choice? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes. Indeed, yeah. Yeah, exactly, yeah. Yeah, yeah.
was Judas' action part of God's plan for us to teach us that there are people like that, that type of thing is
That's a fair point, okay, yes.
And it's us, because Peter, just as bad, denied him. He denied him 3 times, just like Jesus told him he would. I mean, it was, one is bad, the other is just.
Well, what that, because I think we've got to see Peter from a few different angles, but yeah, I hear. Yes. He was a zealot, yes. Right, yes, that's true. Mm-hmm. Yeah, interesting, yep. Yeah, yes. So I believe that Judas had a choice, but I believe that God knew he would in advance. And that's just foreknowledge, but not predestination. So again, the difference is if I knew that you were going to wear this blue shirt tonight, and I knew God gave me the foreknowledge to know that, did I have any say in what you wore tonight to church? Did I influence you at all? And the answer is no. So I knew I had perfect foreknowledge, but I didn't influence your choice. And I think that's what it was with Judas, is there's perfect foreknowledge, but not an influence choice. It was a free will choice. And I guess we could say, in a way, because we have a hard time wrapping our head around that, I guess we'd say this: if it wasn't Judas, it could have been somebody else. God did not predetermine that Judas, in particular, would make these choices. He made his own choices, but God knew he would and planned for it. Yeah. Who is Judas Iscariot, by the way? I had mentioned he was the only Judean. He was from Judah. The rest were from Galilee area. We already talked about Jesus chose him to be a disciple. What was his role in the disciples? What was he in charge of? We had mentioned that, but let's get it out there. He was the money bag keeper. Okay. All right. We kind of throw around the motivation. The basic motivation was greed. But there's some more complex things. How much was Judas paid to betray Jesus? Renee, Naomi, do you guys know how much? I'm going to bring you in the conversation. How much Judas was paid to betray Jesus? They sit a little bit back there, so it's okay if you don't know. I mean, it's just one of those small details. Yeah, it was. Just, guys, it was 30 pieces of silver. Indeed, it was 30 pieces of silver. Hey, listen, can you turn your Bibles to a place? I want to turn to the book of Zechariah. Zechariah is in the Old Testament, as you can tell from the name. Zechariah. And I'll freely admit, I do not have the books of the Bible memorized, because I didn't grow up in church. I didn't get taught that. I was an adult convert. Zechariah chapter 11. Zechariah chapter 11. Of course, that gives me unique experiences, and yet I don't have the books of the Bible memorized. Zechariah chapter 11, starting with verse 12. We've got 12 and 13. If you think it best, give me my pay, but if not, keep it. Pieces of silver. And the Lord said to me, throw it to the potter, at which they priced me. Silver and seems so absolutely weirdly obscure. And if you were a Jewish person living, a year before these events, forget it. This is one of those things. Now, we have the advantage of looking back and saying, aha, the price with which they priced me was how much? 30 pieces of silver. How much was Judas paid to betray? 30 pieces of silver of the potter. What did Judas do? What did Judas do with the money? Do you remember what he did? He had remorse, and so he threw it back, basically, into the Pharisees. I'm not sure it was in the temple in particular, but he threw it back at them, and they wouldn't touch it. It's blood money. And they said, it's blood money. What do we do with it? Potter's field. And now we have fruition. This is a foreshadowing of everything that comes to place. I love these things because it says, my faith is real, my God is living, he had a plan, and this is unfolding. And it bolsters my faith, and it gives me something to tell someone else. If ever the opportunity comes, and I could say, well, listen, this was actually foretold in the Old Testament. Zechariah 11 shadows in imperial and strange at first comes to full fruition. Throw it to the potter's field. Here is another interesting thing of foreshadowing. Chapter 37. Turn to Genesis 37. This kind of stuff tonight is why you come to Bible study. You get this. It's wonderful. Genesis 37, starting with verse 26. Judah said to his brothers, Judah, we're one letter away, or one phoneme away from Judas, right? Judah, Judas. But remember, it's not just that. Judas was from what? Judah. Okay? So we've got Judah says to his brothers. Okay? And how many brothers did Judah have? 11 brothers. How many apostles were there besides Judas? 11. Are you seeing it now? Okay, so Judah said to his brothers, what will we gain if we brother and cover up his blood? It wasn't, I think we could see the implication. It was not Judas's, it wasn't his intention, or he didn't quite realize that his actions would lead to necessarily Jesus' death. And perhaps that was the remorse part, but who knows? But Judah says, brother, and cover up his blood. Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, to the Gentiles. And Jesus was handed over to the Gentiles to be crucified, right? Let us sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh and blood. And Jesus was their kinsman, right? And he agreed with him, right? Jesus probably called him brother on many occasions as an apostle. So when the Midianite merchants came by, his brothers pulled Joseph up from the cistern and sold him for how much? 20 shekels of silver to the Ishmaelites, who took him to Egypt. 20 pieces of silver. What's missing? 10. To Genesis 42. Genesis 42, 5. Joseph grain to put each back in his sack and to give them provisions for their journey. This was done for them. Each man's silver. How many brothers came to visit Joseph that day? 10. Back home, right? Joseph was in actuality the brother. There were 12 in all. 12 minus 2 equals 10. You had 20 silver first, and then pockets. Here's the other 10. That's 30 silver. Some foreshadowing, symbology there. Judah, Judas, from Judah, right? 30 pieces of silver. So here God, in order to more fully and prophetically point to his plan, point his people and say, look, this is my intention, this is what I'm doing. We can add it up. 20 plus 10 equals 30 pieces of silver. Priced me, which they betrayed me. For the religious rulers, the unexpected boon of having one disciples betray Jesus to them was too good to pass up. They were not going to pass that up. The Sanhedrin and company decided to arrest Passover regardless of Jesus' popularity and the city being flooded with people, because Judas was going to give them the right opportunity, the right time, when there wouldn't be many people around, where they could do it in subterfuge and without a lot of eyes upon them, and so not create a fuss or a riot, right? Judas was going to provide them a moment, that place, delighted. Look at 12. On the first day of unleavened bread, Passover lamb was being sacrificed, said to him, this is why we don't use this one. This is exactly why we don't use this one. Ugh. How about why this is like this? See? Now, and it's been that way, which is why I went to the cheapy one. This is the top of the line. And yet, here it is, betraying us. We sold our silver, and it betrayed us. So the first day of unleavened bread, you start the feast of unleavened the feast of unleavened bread as one holiday, but it starts with Passover and then goes on for 7 days. So you've got 8 days of festivities, really big holiday. Okay, the language can seem a bit imprecise on verse 12, but this was the 14th of Nisan, which is actually Passover day. It's even before they sacrificed the lamb. Okay? The lamb would be sacrificed around 3 o'clock. My voice, can keep it here. Just keep it? Okay. And so lamb around 3 o'clock on that day. And they've got a lot of people they need to get their sacrificial lambs to. Like 1.2 million. Okay? So they start that early. And by the way, although it's hard to find this in commentaries, some people didn't have Passover on Passover day. They had to have it sometime in that week. Okay, they couldn't eat Passover and Passover because there was nowhere to have it, or they didn't get their animal it was just logistic. So in any event, so this is that 14th day of Nisan, which is a month that Hebrews have, but it's basically Passover day. The lamb hasn't been slain yet. Anyhow, verse 13, and he sent 2 disciples and said to them, go into the city, and a man will meet you carrying a pitcher of water. Follow him. Tells us that it's Peter and John that are sent. Okay? Now, with everybody, the disciples know who Jesus meant. I'm going to pause that. I'm going to pose that to you. It's a bit of a hard one, but with everybody, kind of how so? Would it be the first person carrying water, maybe? Oh, you have done your study. I know who to call on if I ever can't do this. You're doing this. If you're filling in for me, she got the answers there. But yes, she's looking away. Okay, that's good. Being humble. It was normally the women that would carry the water. That was women's work. Women's work was basically everything, and men's work was to stand around and talk. And that was, no, I'm just kidding. Not really. But women did some heavy labor, okay? They did stuff. And they took care of that household. Got the water. Kind of strange that the women are carrying this heavy, right? They got some muscles on them. And so you've got a man. If you have a man carrying water, then it's probably a lowly slave of somebody rich enough to, not terribly rich, but so this would be a little bit of it is the first man they meet carrying water, or the first man that crosses their path, okay? Verse 14, and wherever he enters, so you're going to follow this man that's carrying water. You're going to see him, follow him. Wherever he enters, say to the owner of that house, the teacher says, where is my guest room? And I eat the Passover with my disciples. And he himself, that is the owner of the house, will show you a large upper room furnished and ready. Prepare for us there. Now, according to one commentary, actually a few, they said that owners of homes in Jerusalem were obligated to provide space for pilgrims to eat their Passover lambs. And I'm assuming that the obligation is something like, you need a place to, have your Passover lamb. That's great. I have a place for you, and that's my obligation. But your obligation would be to offer me some money for it. I'm pretty sure some remuneration was a cultural obligation. If you didn't, that's on you. God's going to deal with minds. Disciples went out and found it, and they prepared the. No. There was. How could the man know who the teacher was? I mean, they come and say the teacher needs.
The word teacher could have been in translation, because I wonder why they didn't say rabbi or, something like that.
I'm sure it was rabbi in Hebrew, Rabbini's Aramaic, so I'm sure it was. Yeah. Yes.
Is this a number of days, like 4 or 5, since he entered Jerusalem riding on a donkey, and people are laying palm branches?
Yeah, it would. Yeah, it's. I think it's 7 days later. I'm thinking to myself. Yeah, the festival of booths, and then or 10 days later, I think something like that. It's been a long time since I've concentrated on the holidays, and I should. I feel bad, but yes, it's within that time frame. It's recent enough.
So I think either that or his teaching in the temple would have kind of circulated news of this man from Nazareth who's the miracle worker, saying extraordinary things.
It could be. One commentary says that Jesus set this up ahead of time. That Jesus knew who it was, and Jesus arranged it. I don't think so. I don't think so at all. I think that God gave this man a vision or a calling or something and said, hey, this is what's going to happen, and this is what you need to do. I think it was providentially set by God himself. But I have to guess. But what we is there encounter this man getting water, and they follow him, and that is the exact place. So even if Jesus sets it up ahead of the 1.2 million people in Jerusalem right now, that's the one guy they find and follow. Okay, so either way, you've got a miracle. But I'm of opinion that God set this. God gave the owner of the house a vision, and said, he's going to come to you and said, the master. That is exactly what I indeed said, yes. And the Spirit working on them and basically telling them providentially, hey, this is going to happen. In a dream, a vision, an unction. That's what I think. But it could be any one of those. Either way, we know it's a mysterious miracle. And why the elaborate ritual? Why send 2 disciples? Why the sign of the man with the jar? And then why? Why? Any idea?
Because they had to be at a certain place, a designated spot for that to happen.
Okay.
I mean, it's just like going outside, he told them and it was there. And so Jesus was foretelling everything that was to come.
All right.
Even, the rules and army and, all this and so forth. He was telling them what happened in this order of things to come. But
Mhm. Yeah, exactly. Providentially. Any other theories? Why Peter and John? Well, yeah, exactly. Mhm. I'll tell you why. I'm, I'm very confident of this one. Verses 10 and 11. What does it say there? Jesus is showing his heart, what he wants. Somebody can say it loud. Yeah. That's why the cloak and dagger. Jesus did not want Judas to know where the Last Supper was going to be. That's why he told no one where it was going to be, and only sent the two out and said, you're going to see a man, follow him, and that's where it's going to be. Because there would be no better place to arrest Jesus, and all the followers would have cornered all of them, than in that upper room. Behind those four walls, or no one's going to see them. Okay? No one is going to see them. You know, even if it's an open air upper room, which sometimes they had without a roof, it still has the sides of the wall. It's the perfect opportunity. The perfect opportunity to arrest Jesus and all the central disciples, the 12. The 11, I should say. And Jesus didn't want that. Jesus even said, I desired to have this meal with you. It was important that Jesus have that meal with them uninterrupted. That was the Last Supper. And there were things